Welcome back to the show. We're out at Premier Farm and Home. We're joined by Chad. It's good to see you, Chad.
Hey, what's going on, Brian?
Hey, last week we got to talk about coating on some of the fertilizers, and we were kind of talking off camera, and you said, we should really talk about some of the other organics and some of the other things.
What we're seeing, Brian, is we're seeing a resurgence or an appearance of some more blended sources of nitrogen coming in, and I'm a fan of multiple sources of nitrogen, so you don't overload one way or another. It just kind of helps with the true slow release nature of it. So one thing you're running into is they're blending in milorganite, which is an organic source of fertilizer, in with our mineral sources. So what you're getting is a little bit of extra organic matter in addition to fertilizer when you're putting it out. And I just think that's kind of a neat thing that they're bringing into the business.
Well, organic.
Right.
Now, when I think of organic, I think of big clumps of dirt or wood or something like that, but this is not what I'm thinking of.
No, this would be something else. The city of Milwaukee produces it for us. They dry it out, sanitize it, and bring it back here. And what it is essentially organic waste that we put out on the yard, and what it does is it doesn't break down at once. What's required is the bacteria in the soil have to eat it, then when they die, they mineralize it and release it. So it's not available, or at least not all of it's available right away. This process of mineralization has to take place.
And why should we be thinking about using those versus some of the fertilizers we've used for years?
Well, what it does is it just offers another avenue of release. So you have these, what I call the still organic, urea is still an organic compound, but it's what we have these fast release ones that, bam, the yard gets something now. Okay, the coatings break down, but then what? What can we do that would be there to build up that soil over time? So these organics, what they do is they get on the soil and nothing happens the first time. Then you do it again, nothing really happens. And then you do it again, and then a year or two goes by, and then they start releasing, and it's just like dividends being paid every year while you have that yard. That's a really cool deal.
Does it determine the health of our yard? I mean, as far as if we've got patchy, we're going to overseed and some other stuff. Does this play a role in that?
What it does is it helps with your general soil health. So what you're doing is you're going to create drainage channels, help turn that clay over time into something that's a little more drainable, a little well drained, and a little bit more breathable so that the root system can get deep. And that's really what we're looking for.
Well, and I mean, everybody knows, at least here in Northeast Kansas, that we've got very clayey soils.
That's
and
right.
And
that's right.
Runoff is one of those issues
exactly.
that we deal with all the time.
Yep. One other thing that's kind of neat out there, Brian, is they have these new nitrogen stabilizers that they put out there. And what that means is, okay, we have one method where you try to coat it and you try to get it, or maybe even you bond it. There's some ones like Mesa with their methylated ureas. They actually kind of infuse it into another molecule that breaks down slow. Well, what these stabilizers do is they essentially just, rather than when the urea comes out, it separates into ammonia and an ammonium, I guess, are the two. And what it does is an enzyme in the soil makes that happen, and it just helps stop that process. So it's just not released. So urea in itself isn't released right away. It's once that urease in the soil breaks it down. So these new stabilizers, essentially, they come in and they just cut the process out. So, or slow it down greatly, so you don't have to worry about a coating or all these other things, and can give you similar results to a sulfur coating at a lot less expense.
Is fall a good time to manage our yard as far as our soil health, or spring?
Oh, it is the time, right?
Okay.
It's a lot easier to do things in the fall. You don't have the pressure of weeds, so the fertility can be a little higher. You really can be aggressive because the turf's growing well, so any aeration or slicing or those sorts of things can happen. And you don't have that risk to the plant like you do in spring. You may damage it, and it may not perform for you in the summer.
We've talked about aerating several times on the show, and we always talk about doing it in spring when we've got great health. So fall, aerate, overseed, after we aerate or before we aerate?
Well, Brian, after you go ahead and, anytime you go ahead and rough up the soil, I think it's a good idea to seed, because you're providing seeds for the seed bank, quote unquote. So then instead of weeds popping up, you may have your own turf pop up, at some time later on. But if you have to compare the two for just pure seeding purposes, a slicer always affects more of the surface than your aeration machine. Because aeration, they have little holes, and you may affect 8%, 11% of the surface, which is good, but it's not as good as a slicer affecting like a third of the surface.
We want to remind everybody, heycow.com, if you want to see this episode again or any of the other episodes that we've cut over the years, or our website, which is ExportAGam in Kansas. It's good to see you.